So you think you have $200,000 of equity and you're already planning on what you're going to spend it on. Maybe a lakefront property in Brainerd, maybe you're downsizing to a low maintenance condo. But then you walk away with $162,000. So where did that other $38,000 go? Today, I'm going to show you how to calculate your real home equity. It's your net proceeds, the number that actually matters when you're selling a home. Most sellers make the same mistake. They think that their equity is just their home value minus their mortgage. And while that's technically the actual definition of it, what really matters to sellers versus what they think matters, what actually matters is their net proceeds, their real equity. And that is their home value minus their mortgage minus 8 to 10% of selling costs, right? So on a $400,000 home, that's between $32,000 to $40,000 off the top of your seller proceeds. And that's something to definitely keep in mind because that's pretty important. And if you're thinking about selling here in central Minnesota, Brainerd Lakes, St. Cloud, Little Falls, reach out. I'd love to discuss what exactly your equity could be and what you would be actually looking at for your seller proceeds. But by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to calculate your true equity and what your proceeds would look like and what that could actually get you here in central Minnesota in the three major markets that I cover, the Brainerd Lakes, Little Falls, and St. Cloud MSA. So let's start with the hard truth, the real costs of selling. That's besides your mortgage. And, according to just national average data and just what I've seen personally, you're typically going to be around 8 to 10% pretty much every time. Now, that's not a guarantee. It can be less, and it honestly can sometimes even be more. But as a general rule of thumb, 8 to 10%, that's kind of what you're going to be looking at before, everything else. So first, the realtor commission. The national average for sellers is about 5.7%, and apparently it went up in 2026. Now, obviously, these are negotiable. Okay, these are just averages. So, you're going to want to speak with your local realtor to see what exactly they charge and honestly interview multiple. That doesn't hurt too. But the average commission is about 2.88% for a listing and 2.82% for buyers. So on a $400,000 home, you could be expecting to pay about $22,800 in commission alone if you elect to pay for the buyer's commission as well, right? So if it was just the listing commission, it would be less than that. Now, I know what you're thinking, or you might be thinking, didn't commissions go away in 2024 following the NAR lawsuit? Well, the short answer is no. They paused and rebounded, and you can see, they went up on average by about 0.4%, well, 0.38%. What it really changed was how exactly commissions are discussed, because previously buyers and sellers felt like they weren't really, like they didn't have an option in commissions, especially sellers. They thought that they were required to pay buyer commissions, and now commissions were always negotiable, but it's now more clear than ever that they are. So sellers now exclusively have to actually agree to pay the buyer commission. So it's kind of like separate things now. And even though it is an option to pay for buyer's commission, I still will recommend that to all of my sellers because it vastly increases the audience of people that would be interested in buying your home. And it just makes it more appealing in general because not every buyer, in fact, I would honestly argue most buyers are not willing to pay their buyer or their agent their commission because, that's like they're already buying a house and on top of that they have to pay commission. It's like what's going on here? So I will always recommend that a seller pays for buyer commissions, but it is all negotiable at the end of the day. Even the percentage that your agent charges is negotiable. Second is closing costs. Okay, that's another about 1.8% to 3% on top of commission. You're talking about transfer taxes, title search and insurance, escrow/settlement fees, and recording and attorney fees. Now, on a $400,000 home, it could be about $7,200 to $12,000 on top of commission. Now, this is pretty key. It varies. Okay, it varies by state, varies by county. It's all over the place. This is not an absolute solid number. In fact, from what I've seen, usually it's lower than this. Okay, it's just something that you should you want to plan for the worst, right? And hope for the best. So plan for this range, and if you end up paying less, well, that's beautiful, right? That's another couple $1,000s in your pocket. So using that info, let's just say it was a $400,000 house. Commission, average commission of 5.7%, $22,800. Closing costs, 2.5%, $10,000. Total cost to sell, 8.2%. That's $32,800. Okay. So here is the true equity formula. This is what you really could and should be using as a kind of preliminary number crunch to see what you would be walking away from the closing with. So let's walk it through a $400,000 home like we just did, right? Step one, what will your home sell for? $400,000. Step two, closing costs at 9%. That's a little bit up from the 8 point whatever it was that we just did. But, like I said, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Selling costs at 9%, that's $36,000. Now let's just say you still owe $200,000 on your mortgage. That's $236,000, right, out of the $400,000. The true equity would be around $164,000. So what you thought was going to be $200,000 was actually $164,000. So let me walk you through 3 different scenarios of recently purchased, mid-ownership, and nearly paid off. Okay, so number 1, when you've barely paid down the principal, let's just say you bought 3 years ago, put a little bit of money down, paid a little bit, money off the principal. It won't be much on the very beginning of your mortgage. It's usually just interest, but let's just say sale price of $350,000 at selling cost of 9%. What you thought was going to be a $50,000 net equity, net proceeds, was actually about $20,000 after your closing costs. So in reality, if you buy and then sell in a short amount of time, you can honestly lose money, even if your property appreciated. So keep that in mind. Scenario 2, the classic I've got $200,000 in equity story, okay? You're going to sell for $450,000, selling cost of $40,000, your mortgage owed of $250,000. You thought you were going to get $200,000. In reality, you got close to probably $160,000. Keep in mind, it doesn't have to be 9% selling costs, okay? It can be less and it can be more. It all depends. Scenario 3, even at the finish line, the costs are still there, okay? You could have a paid off house and you're still gonna be paying those selling costs. Sale price, $375,000. Selling costs at 9%, $33,750. Mortgage owed, $50,000. I would love to only owe $50,000 on my mortgage personally. That'd be great. But what you thought was going to be $325,000, in reality, closer to $300,000. So those are our 3 scenarios that you can kind of maybe apply your specific situation into to just kind of get a rough idea before you get into the real number crunching. All right, let's talk about what $350,000 of equity, real net proceeds, would actually buy here in the Brainerd Lakes area first. $350,000 would not get you onto Gull Lake. I'm so sorry to break your heart. You are not getting onto Gull Lake with $350,000. But it's going to get you into the Brainerd Lakes market, okay, just not onto Gull Lake specifically. The average lakefront listing, according to lakeplace.com, May 2026, was about $560,000. Okay, and there's 62 lakefront listings under $300,000, but keep in mind, these are mostly land or modest cabins on smaller lakes, not the whitefish chain, okay? That being said, you can still get a lakefront property. Just don't expect one of those $4 million homes on Gull Lake sitting on 2 acres, okay? So with $350,000 and you're wanting to get onto a lakefront property, you have 3 plans or 3 plays. Go all in on an entry-level cottage on a smaller lake. Okay, you don't need a $1 million property to still have a gorgeous view, wake up, and look out on that lake every morning. Or stretch with a smaller mortgage into the mid 400,000s for something nicer, right? $50K does go a long way in Minnesota, okay? So we're not talking about LA, right? We're not talking about NYC. We're talking about Minnesota here. $50K goes a long way. Or just skip the waterfront real home ownership, I guess, like the single family homes, and target low maintenance lake area condos in the 350,000 or 300 to $500,000 range. You can still be in proximity of the lake and you would get a nice condo for $350,000 to $500,000. Okay, you are going to get a very nice condo. And honestly, there are condos that are for sale on the lake. They're just it's kind of limited the inventory. You're not going to see a lot of them, but it is still very much possible. All right, Little Falls, $350,000 puts you above the median and gives you leverage. And that's actually very interesting because I just closed with a client here in Little Falls at $350,000 and we actually went over ask on this property, and that's one of the reasons why we actually got it in a multi offer situation. The median home price according to Movoto, probably not pronouncing that right, March 2026 is $334,000 here in Little Falls. So your $350,000 versus the median, it's about $16,000 in negotiating room. Not bad, right? No one likes to overpay for properties, so hopefully it would appraise, but it gives you that little bit of negotiation room. Here's what that buys: a nice historic home outright with money left over. I personally love those older homes. Okay, I don't really care if they're maintenance nightmares. Absolutely gorgeous. I love those. But you could get a new construction in solid neighborhoods. Riverview, right? That whole kind of like area. That's where we got that property at. And $350,000, I got him a nice house. And there's plenty of stuff being built out there all the time. 3 to 4 bedrooms, larger lots than you would find in a metro. Okay, just an average house around here within the actual city of Little Falls. 3 to 4 bedrooms, you could get a nicer house for $350,000, right? No HOAs, strong resale demand, right? You are going to get a pretty nice house for $350,000 here in Little Falls. Okay, St. Cloud, $350,000 is real buying power with cash left over. Here in St. Cloud, the median home price, according to, once again, Movado, I don't know, January 2026 data, the median home price was $283,000. And between these two, the cash left over after a median purchase would be $50,000 to $70,000. Use that and renovate, build up that savings, or pay that sucker down a little bit. That'd be nice, right? A nice $50,000 down payment. Nothing wrong with that. 2 ways to play it: above average suburban in Sartell or Sauk Rapids, just buy it outright. It's possible. There's plenty out there. Or stretch to $400,000 to $450,000 with a lake mortgage, with a small mortgage for the best neighborhoods. I'm still in the Brainerd Lakes area in my mind. Yeah, $400,000 to $450,000 would get you a very, very nice house in the kind of St. Cloud metro area. Even when you're approaching $350,000 to $360,000, you're gonna get a pretty nice property. But for $450,000, you're in a perfect place. Okay, either way, 30 minutes to Little Falls, 45 minutes to the lakes. Not entirely true about the 45 minutes to the lakes. I'm pretty sure it's definitely a little bit more than that. Probably closer to like an hour, but still, probably about 45 minutes in the metros at the very least. So as you can see, the same $350,000 of net proceeds that you get from selling your house can give you 3 different lives. Brainerd Lakes area, that $350,000, you're gonna need to stretch a little bit if you really want to get into a nice lakefront home, right? But that's not to say that it's not possible. You just gotta get creative with it. Little Falls, you're gonna get yourself a nice house with a little bit of negotiation room. St. Cloud, you're at the median, you're gonna be sitting pretty nice, okay? You're gonna be sitting pretty nice. You've got options at $350,000, and you could go up a little more if you want to get into those real nicer houses. So before you call a realtor to try to figure out your net equity, here are 3 things to remember so you can do it yourself. Number 1, subtract the costs, okay? True equity is not just home value minus mortgage. It's home value minus mortgage minus 8 to 10% of selling costs, okay? So it's not just those first 2, okay? Obviously, the actual definition of equity is more, or home value minus mortgage, but your net proceeds, the number that you really care about, the number that's in your pockets when you walk away from the sale, that's what you really care about. That's minus 8 to 10% in selling costs. Just use the 9% to be safe, okay? Obviously, it would be nice if it was lower, and it could be, and it honestly probably will be lower. Just be safe, okay? It is kind of middle of the range, even a little bit higher. commission plus closing costs combined, and it's better to be safe than sorry, right? You want to kind of overestimate those costs and come in lower as opposed to estimate lower and come in higher. And number three, know your target market. The same dollar buys very different lives in Brainerd, Little Falls, and St. Cloud. All right. So match your net proceeds to the market that it would really fit best in, or even just where you would be most comfortable in. At the end of the day, as long as you're happy, that's all that really matters, right? So as long as you're comfortable, you've basically won. If you're planning a move here in central Minnesota, reach out. Okay, let me help you run the specific numbers for your property. I'll pull your home's likely sale range, calculate your true net proceeds, and walk you through what that actually buys across central Minnesota. All right, so you're not going to be left kind of guessing the huge range of what your closing costs are. I'll pull the realistic, actual regional data and get you kind of a more narrow amount that you could expect to, number one, sell your house in, and what it would actually cost to sell your house. So, link is in the description to get in touch with me, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.